The mahogany conference table gleamed under recessed lighting, its surface so polished Emily Tran could see her reflection, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. A woman on the brink of surrender. In front of her lay a thick folder stamped with gold letters. Marriage agreement. She had signed contracts before, leases, job offers, NDAs, but nothing like this. Nothing that would strip her future of choice and replace it with a deadline. 12 months. Her father sat at the head of the table, shoulders slumped beneath his tailored suit. Henry Tran had once commanded rooms in Washington's political and business circles, but bankruptcy hearings and failing investments had reduced him to a man desperate for survival. "Emily," he rasped, voice heavy with exhaustion, "this is the only way. 1 year. After that, you'll be free." Her mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Unable to meet her daughter's gaze, Emily swallowed hard. She wasn't marrying for love, not for dreams, not even for herself. She was marrying for debt. The door opened, and the atmosphere shifted. Alexander Voss entered with the presence of someone used to commanding entire boardrooms. His suit was midnight black, cut so precisely it seemed part of him. He didn't bother with small talk. His storm grey eyes flicked to the contract, then to her. "Let's be efficient," he said, his voice smooth, deliberate. "The terms are straightforward." His attorney laid out the bullet points like a surgeon explaining a procedure. The marriage would last 12 months. Both parties would appear together at designated public events. There would be no financial entanglement outside what was written, no emotional obligations, no expectations beyond the paper. At the end of 12 months, either party could walk away clean. Emily's stomach knotted tighter with each clause. She forced herself to ask, "So, that's it. We live under one roof, but we're strangers." Alexander's gaze didn't waver. "Not strangers, partners, for a year, without feelings." She pressed, though her throat was dry. "Feelings complicate contracts," he replied. "And this is just business." The words sliced through her like glass. Business. She wasn't a woman to him. She was leverage, a pawn in a game of power. Emily picked up the pen. Her hand shook, but she pressed her name onto the page anyway. Emily Tran, when she finished. Alexander signed beneath her name without hesitation, his signature bold and fluid, like he was authorizing another multi-million-dollar merger. The deal was done. The wedding that followed wasn't a wedding knit, was a formality. No cathedral, no string quartet, no veil. Just a quiet ceremony in a private hall near Georgetown, attended by a handful of family and witnesses. Emily wore a simple ivory dress. Alexander wore black. When the officiant asked if she agreed, Emily whispered, "I do." When it was his turn, Alexander said, "I do," with the exact tone he'd used to approve a contract clause. There was no kiss, only a handshake, firm and cold. That night, in their new apartment overlooking the Potomac River, the silence was suffocating. The view was magnificent. The Washington Monument glittered in the distance. But Emily barely saw it. Alexander stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection tall and unyielding against the city lights. He loosened his tie, but his expression remained impenetrable. "I won't be here much," he said finally. "My work keeps me late. You'll have privacy. We'll coordinate appearances when necessary." Emily lingered in the doorway to the bedroom. "So this is marriage?" she asked softly. "This is survival," he corrected, his eyes hard. 1 year, then we're done." With that, he disappeared into his study. Closing the door with a quiet finality, Emily sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the plain silver band now circling her finger. A ring with no meaning, no promise. She pressed her palms against her face, swallowing the lump in her throat. It was only 12 months. She could endure 12 months, couldn't she? The following Monday, Emily shoved her doubts aside and focused on work. Her job at Aurora Media, one of DC's most influential communications firms, had always been her escape place where her ideas, not her family name, defined her. She arrived early, laptop tucked under her arm, determined to throw herself into the new campaign project she'd been assigned. The company had just signed a massive deal with a new parent group, Voss Holdings. She didn't know much about them, only that they were huge in finance and tech, and that their CEO was notoriously private. The elevators were jammed with staff and executives. Emily stepped in, clutching her coffee, trying to focus on her checklist. The doors slid open again at the lobby, and a group of sharply dressed men entered. At the center was a tall man in a crisp white shirt and grey tie, exuding authority without saying a word. The scent of cedarwood cologne hit her, sharp and familiar. She glanced up and froze. Storm grey eyes. For a split second, their gazes locked. Recognition prickled at the edges of her mind, but the doors slid shut again, and the crowd swallowed him. Whispers rippled through the elevator. "Is that him?" "Yeah, that's the CEO, Alexander Voss. He's here." Emily's blood ran cold. Her husband, the man she had married by contract, the stranger who slept under the same roof yet lived in another world, was the CEO of the very company she worked for. She gripped her coffee cup tighter, her pulse racing. He had never told her, and as she stepped into the conference room for the kickoff meeting, the screen at the front flashed the title, Aurora Media X Voss Holdings Campaign. Longinly sank into her chair, heart pounding. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The man she was supposed to call her husband was about to walk into the room, not as her partner, but as her boss. The Potomac shimmered outside their apartment windows, reflecting the last orange streaks of dusk. Inside, the silence stretched like a second set of walls. Emily set her mug of chamomile tea on the counter, careful not to make noise. Across the open-plan living room, Alexander worked at his laptop, jacket draped neatly over a chair. His posture was straight, his focus absolute, as if she weren't even there. It had been a week since the contract was signed, a week since the ceremony that didn't feel like a wedding. They shared an address, but not a life. "Do you want tea?" she asked, the words tentative, polite. Alexander didn't look up. "No, thank you." The exchange ended there. She sighed softly and retreated to her bedroom, closing the door like drawing a line through their separate worlds at work. Things weren't any easier. Aurora Media's offices buzzed with tension after the merger announcement. Teams had been reshuffled, priorities rewritten, and whispers of layoffs floated through every hallway. Emily tried to bury herself in her marketing tasks, but she quickly became a target. Some colleagues saw her family name as a liability. Her father's financial collapse was no secret. Others saw her as an easy mark, quiet, diligent, unwilling to fight back. On Tuesday morning, during a project meeting, her supervisor dropped a heavy stack of reports in front of her. "Emily, you'll handle all of this by Friday." She blinked. "This is 3 people's workload. Then you'd better work fast," the supervisor said with a shrug, earning chuckles from a few others at the table. Emily pressed her lips together. She wasn't about to beg for fairness. Not here. She nodded, already planning late nights and cold dinners. That evening, she returned to the apartment past 10 p.m., arms full of documents. Alexander was still in the living room, scrolling through spreadsheets on his screen. "You're late," he said, without looking up. Emily set her bag down. "Work. They dumped an entire campaign on me." Something flickered in his eyes at that, though he masked it quickly. "And you didn't refuse?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "Do you think I have that kind of power?" He studied her then, really looked at the shadows under her eyes, the slump in her shoulders. His instinct was to intervene, to tell her exactly how much authority she carried without even realizing it. But revealing that meant revealing himself, and he wasn't ready for that. Instead, he said, "Don't let them break you." Her gaze snapped to his, sharp with fatigue. "That's easy for you to say for the first time." His composure cracked just slightly. He closed his laptop. "You'd be surprised." Emily frowned, confused, but he was already gathering his papers. "Good night," he said, retreating to his study. The next morning, she found herself face to face with him again at work. She was running late for a briefing. Papers clutched to her chest when the elevator doors opened and revealed Alexander inside, flanked by 2 senior executives. He looked as composed as ever, a dark suit setting him apart from everyone else. Their eyes met. For a split second, Emily's pulse stuttered. She quickly stepped in, pressing herself to the corner as the doors closed. No one else seemed to notice the tension. The executives discussed quarterly targets while Alexander stood silent, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed forward. He didn't acknowledge her, didn't even glance again, as if she were invisible. And maybe she was. Here she wasn't his wife. She was just another employee, trapped in a hierarchy he controlled. By Thursday night, exhaustion caught up to her. She stayed at her desk long after the office emptied, fingers aching as she typed the last of her reports. When she finally rose to leave, the world tilted. "Whoa," she muttered, gripping the edge of the desk she hadn't eaten since noon. Her vision blurred as she stumbled into the hallway and nearly collided with Alexander. He had just exited a boardroom, jacket over one arm. His eyes narrowed instantly. "Emily." She waved him off. "I'm fine. Just tired." But when her knees buckled, he caught her without hesitation, his arms strong around her waist. The cedarwood scent she'd come to associate with him enveloped her, grounding her. "You're not fine," he said sharply. "You look ready to collapse." She bristled, embarrassed, trying to pull away. "It's none of your business." His jaw clenched. "Everything about you is my business." The words stunned her. For a moment, she forgot the contract, forgot the cold handshake. She only felt the heat of his hand steadying her. But then his expression shuttered again. He guided her to a bench, ordered an assistant to bring water, and stood over her like a sentinel. When she finally caught her breath, she whispered, "Why are you doing this?" He met her gaze, unreadable. "Because no one else here will." Later that night, back at the apartment, Emily lay awake replaying the moment. Her husband was a stranger. Her boss was a tyrant, and somehow they were the same man. He had drawn walls around his life, but for a split second, she'd seen something else, something human, maybe even protective. She didn't know what to make of it. All she knew was that for the first time since the contract, she felt the faintest crack in the ice surrounding them. The limousine slid along Constitution Avenue, headlights gliding across marble monuments and government buildings lit against the night. Inside the back seat, Emily sat stiffly, her wedding dress replaced by a simple ivory sheath. She stared out the tinted window, watching the Capitol dome disappear behind them, her chest heavy with silence. Across from her, Alexander sat with the same stillness he had worn since the ceremony. His phone lay dark on the seat beside him, as if even he knew that this night demanded his undivided attention. But he didn't speak, didn't offer comfort. Emily's fingers twisted the thin silver band on her left hand. It looked small, fragile, against the weight of what it meant. She finally broke the silence. Is this what marriage is supposed to feel like? Alexander's gaze flicked to her. This isn't marriage. It's a contract. Don't confuse the two. Her breath caught, and she turned back to the window, hiding the sting in her eyes. The limousine stopped in front of their new home, a penthouse in the heart of downtown Washington. Floor-to-ceiling glass, clean lines, understated luxury. Emily stepped inside, her heels clicking against polished marble, and felt swallowed by the emptiness. Alexander set his briefcase on the counter, as if arriving after a normal day at the office. He removed his tie, his movements precise, controlled. "You'll have the master suite," he said. "I'll take the study." Emily turned sharply. That's it. No conversation, no attempt at anything. His eyes, storm grey and unyielding, met hers. "You wanted honesty. Here it is. I won't force you into anything. We share a name, nothing more." The bluntness should have been a relief, but instead it hollowed her. She had braced for dominance, for demands, for some proof that this man intended to control her life. But indifference cut deeper. She crossed her arms. "So, I'm a roommate with a ring. If that helps you sleep," he said coolly. They moved through the space like ghosts. Emily wandered into the master suite, a room far larger than her entire apartment back in Arlington. The king bed stretched like an ocean. The closet, already half filled with tailored suits, carried the faint cedar scent she now recognized as his. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the city skyline beyond the glass wall. Washington buzzed below, full of ambition and noise. But here it was quiet, too quiet. She thought of her friends, most of whom didn't even know she was married. She thought of her father in a hospital bed, the machines keeping him alive. And she thought of the man in the next room, a stranger who now defined her future. Her throat tightened. She refused to cry. Meanwhile, Alexander poured himself a glass of scotch in the study. He leaned against the desk, the amber liquid catching the light. He'd expected resistance, maybe even drama. Emily Tran had surprised him. She was quiet but unbroken, fragile but unyielding, and that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. The last time he had opened himself to another person, it had ended in betrayal and tragedy. He had learned to live in control, to turn emotion into liability. And this marriage, this calculated deal, was supposed to keep it that way. So why had he found himself watching her so closely at Aurora Media? Why had her exhaustion, her fire, her refusal to beg triggered something in him he thought he'd buried? He downed the scotch and told himself it didn't matter near midnight. Emily wandered into the kitchen, her robe wrapped tight. She startled when she found Alexander still awake, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, glass in hand. "You don't sleep?" she asked, her voice sharper than intended. He looked up, eyes meeting hers over the rim of his glass. "I work better at night, and you expect me to just live here, pretend we're not tied together by this ring?" "You don't have to pretend," he said calmly. You only have to endure. Her chest burned. Endure, that's the word you use for a marriage. It's the truth. She shook her head, her laugh hollow. Then I hope you're ready, Alexander, because I don't break easy. And if you think I'll play the role of silent, obedient wife for 12 months, you've chosen the wrong woman. For the first time, his composure cracked. A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips, dangerous and intrigued. Good, I don't need a doll. I need someone who can stand. Her pulse jumped, and she hated it. She hated that his voice could cut through her anger and spark something she couldn't name. Later, lying in bed, Emily stared at the ceiling, sleepless. She could still feel his presence in the apartment, his shadow reaching into every corner. She had expected cruelty, expected demands. Instead, she found indifference mixed with a strange, disarming respect. It was almost worse, because indifference could change. Indifference could shift, and that terrified her more than any contract in the study. Alexander worked past 2 a.m., but his mind wasn't on the spreadsheets glowing on his laptop. It was on the woman down the hall, fierce even when trembling, unwilling to bow even when cornered. For the first time in years, Alexander Voss wasn't certain of the ground beneath him. The Monday morning rush at Aurora Media was chaos. Staff swarmed hallways with coffee cups and laptops, the buzz of nervous energy from the merger still in the air. Emily stepped out of the elevator, clutching her notebook. Determined to survive another week, she hadn't told anyone about her new last name. She signed emails as Emily Tran, careful to keep her marriage sealed behind silence. No one needed to know, especially not here. But her anonymity didn't shield her from the politics. By mid-morning, her supervisor, Cheryl, dropped a stack of client briefs on Emily's desk. "You'll handle the preliminary pitches," Cheryl said sweetly, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "It'll be good practice." Emily blinked at the mountain of work. These are usually divided among 3 associates. Cheryl's smile sharpened. "Then consider it a challenge. Unless it's too much for you." Laughter rippled from nearby desks. Emily kept her chin high. "I'll handle it." Her fingers tightened on the papers as she returned to her cubicle. She could feel eyes on her back, some pitying, some mocking. She forced herself to breathe. She had promised herself she wouldn't let anyone see her crack. That afternoon, she ducked into the break room to refill her coffee. A pair of co-workers, Denise and Lara, stood by the counter, whispering, "Poor Emily, still hanging on, even with her dad bankrupt. Yeah, and she thinks she'll climb higher. Please, she's lucky to have a desk." Emily froze. The words stung like nettles. She considered storming out, but instead she stepped forward, meeting their eyes. "If you have something to say, say it to me." Denise flushed. Lara smirked. "Relax, we were just talking." Emily walked out without another word, heart pounding, cheeks burning. She hated herself for caring, but the weight of judgment was crushing. By Thursday, the pressure peaked. Emily presented a campaign draft in the boardroom, standing in front of senior staff. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she clicked through the slides. Midway through, Cheryl interrupted. "That's not the angle Voss Holdings is expecting. Did you even read the directive?" "I did," Emily replied carefully. "But I thought this strategy would differentiate us." "It's off base," Cheryl cut in, turning to the others. "We can't have junior staff wasting executive time." Heat rose in Emily's chest. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but the room buzzed with low chuckles. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to finish the presentation, ignoring the smirks. When it was over, she gathered her notes, hands shaking. Then a voice spoke from the back of the room, low, commanding. "I don't agree." Everyone turned. Alexander Voss had entered quietly, leaning against the doorway in a tailored suit. His grey eyes scanned the room, icy calm. "The strategy has flaws," he said, "but it also has insight. Differentiation is exactly what we need in a crowded market. Don't dismiss initiative because it doesn't follow your outline." The room went silent. Cheryl's face drained of color. Alexander's gaze lingered on Emily for a heartbeat too long before he turned to leave. "I expect revisions on my desk by Monday," with her input, and then he was gone. The air in the office shifted instantly. Whispers trailed behind Emily as she left the room. By the time she returned to her cubicle, Denise leaned over with wide eyes. "You just got defended by Voss himself. Do you know what that means?" Emily forced a smile, though her heart raced. "Probably that I need to work harder." But deep down, confusion twisted inside her. Why had he spoken up? Why risk undermining her supervisor for her sake? That night, back at the penthouse, Emily dropped her bag and leaned against the counter. Alexander was already home, sipping water as if the day had been ordinary. "You didn't have to do that," she said. He looked up, expression unreadable. "Do what?" "Call out my supervisor in front of half the boardroom." "She was wrong," he replied simply. "You were right to try a different angle." Her jaw clenched. "It doesn't matter. Now everyone thinks I'm some teacher's pet. Or worse." His eyes narrowed. "Worse." She met his gaze, frustration bubbling. "That I'm using someone, that I don't deserve to be here on my own." For a moment, silence thickened between them. Then his voice dropped, low and even. "Do you?" Emily flinched. "Excuse me?" "Do you deserve to be there?" His gaze pierced hers. "Because if you don't believe it, no one else will." Her breath caught. Anger and shame collided inside her. "I didn't ask for your lecture. I just wanted," she stopped, fists tight at her sides. "I just wanted to do this on my own." For the first time that night, something softened in his expression. Not warmth, exactly something closer to respect. "Then prove it," he said quietly, later. Emily lay awake in bed, staring at the city lights filtering through the curtains. His words echoed in her mind. "Do you deserve to be there?" She hated him for asking it. Hated him more for making her wonder. In the study, Alexander scrolled through reports, but his mind wasn't on numbers. It was on her. The fire in her eyes, the refusal to be rescued even when he'd just stepped in. He told himself he had defended her because he couldn't stand incompetence in his staff. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had defended her because he couldn't stand to see her dismissed. And that truth was dangerous, because cracks had begun to form in the ice he had built around himself, and Emily was the one breaking through. The ballroom of the Willard Hotel gleamed with chandeliers and polished marble, packed with Washington's elite senators, lobbyists, CEOs, and heirs who'd never worked a day in their lives. Emily adjusted the strap of her navy blue gown, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on her. The dress wasn't couture like the others in the room. It was simple, elegant, borrowed from her mother's closet. She reminded herself of Alexander's instructions. Smile. Don't speak unless spoken to, and stand by my side for photographs. But Alexander wasn't by her side. He was across the room, locked in a discussion with two senators, his hand resting casually in his pocket. He looked every inch the commanding CEO, untouchable, magnetic. Emily stood alone by the champagne table, clutching her glass like a lifeline. "Emily, isn't it?" A voice drawled. She turned to find Richard Hale, a rival executive with a reputation for cruelty wrapped in charm. His gaze swept over her with open disdain. "I didn't realize Alexander's wife would be so ordinary," he said, swirling his drink. "I expected someone, well, more polished." Heat flared in Emily's cheeks. "Excuse me," Richard smirked. "Don't take it personally. Everyone knows these arrangements aren't about compatibility. They're about convenience. You must be very grateful, given your family's situation." The words landed like blows. Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to snap back, to defend herself, but the murmurs of nearby guests reminded her where she was. One wrong move and the gossip would be everywhere by morning. Her grip on the champagne flute trembled. "Is there a problem here?" The voice was low, edged in steel. Emily turned, relief flooding her as Alexander appeared at her side, taller, colder, his presence commanding the entire corner of the room. Richard straightened, mask of charm slipping. "Alexander, we were just insulting my wife." Alexander cut in, his grey eyes like sharpened ice. "In public?" "At my event," Richard's smirk faltered. "It was just conversation." Alexander stepped closer, his voice dropping but no less lethal. "The next time you speak to her, you'll remember who she is, and who I am. Otherwise, your name will be erased from every boardroom in this city." The room went silent around them, whispers crackling like electricity. Richard's face turned red, his bravado crumbling. He muttered something incoherent and slunk away, drink in hand. Emily stood frozen, pulse racing, as Alexander turned to her. "Are you all right?" he asked, softer now, though the tension in his jaw remained. She swallowed hard. "Yes, I just didn't expect you to defend you." His eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. "Emily, when you stand next to me, no one touches you. No one humiliates you. Not while I'm here." Her throat tightened. She wanted to dismiss it, to chalk it up to image protection. But the way he'd said it, the fury, the certainty felt far too personal. The rest of the evening blurred. Reporters snapped photos of them together, his arm firm around her waist as though daring anyone to question their unity. Emily smiled for the cameras, though her mind raced. Later, when they finally returned to the penthouse, Emily slipped off her heels and turned to him. "Why did you do that?" Alexander loosened his tie, his movements sharp. "Because," he crossed a line. "But you've always said this marriage is a contract," she pressed, "that we're just partners. Why risk your reputation for me?" He looked at her then, truly looked, and she saw something raw flicker in his eyes. "Because I won't stand by and watch someone tear you down." "Not you," Emily's breath caught. The walls she had built around her heart trembled. "You keep saying this is business," she whispered. But tonight didn't feel like business. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Alexander turned away, his voice low. "Don't read into it." But his clenched fists, the storm in his gaze, betrayed him. Later that night, Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She could still feel the heat of his hand on her waist, hear the venom in his voice when he'd called her my wife. She had never felt protected like that, not at work, not even by her own family, and it terrified her. because for the first time since signing that contract, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this marriage was becoming something far more dangerous than she had bargained for. And Alexander. He stood alone in his study, glass of scotch untouched. He told himself he'd defended her to maintain appearances, to protect the Voss name, but deep down he knew the truth. He hadn't defended his image. He had defended her, and that truth unsettled him more than any corporate war ever had. The morning after the gala, the Washington Post ran a short piece. Voss Holdings CEO defends wife against rival executive at Willard Gala. The article was tame, but the headlines spread like wildfire across corporate feeds. Emily stared at it on her phone, her stomach twisting. The word wife looked foreign in bold print, as though it belonged to someone else. By the time she arrived at Aurora Media, whispers followed her through the office. Colleagues who once dismissed her now regarded her with thinly veiled curiosity or fear. Cheryl, her supervisor, avoided eye contact entirely, but the attention suffocated Emily. Every glance felt like a question she couldn't answer. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She was the CEO's wife, and she wasn't sure which was worse, being invisible or being exposed. That night, the penthouse was unusually quiet. Alexander was home early, jacket slung over the back of a chair, his tie discarded. He stood by the window, city lights casting his face in sharp relief. Emily hesitated, then stepped closer. "You didn't tell me you'd be in the paper." His mouth curved, humorless. "The press eats scraps." That was nothing. It didn't feel like nothing to me. She crossed her arms. "Why do you keep doing this? Playing the protector one moment, then pushing me away the next." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned, his expression shadowed. "Because people like Richard Hale aren't just arrogant. They're dangerous. They tear people down for sport. I won't let them do that to you." Her chest tightened. "Why? Why me?" His jaw flexed. He looked as though he were fighting an invisible war. Finally, he spoke, voice low. "Because I've seen what happens when you let people like him win." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Alexander's eyes darkened. He turned back to the window, shoulders rigid. "My sister, Lily, she was younger than me, brighter. She had a future in politics, internships on the Hill, scholarships, everything. But she trusted the wrong people. A deal went bad. Her reputation was shredded, and she..." His voice caught for the briefest second. "She didn't survive it." Emily's breath hitched. "I'm so sorry." "She was 22, Alexander continued, his voice flat now, as if rehearsed from years of silence. "She believed people would protect her. Instead, they exploited her weakness. I learned then that kindness is a liability. Trust gets you destroyed. And the only way to survive in this city is to be harder than the people trying to break you." The weight of his words pressed into Emily's chest. Suddenly, his coldness, his obsession with control, it all made sense. His armor wasn't arrogance. It was grief hardened into steel. She stepped closer, her hand hovering near his arm. "That's why you married me, isn't it? To send a message. To punish anyone who thought they could humiliate my family the way yours was humiliated." He turned sharply, storm grey eyes locking onto hers. "I married you because it was convenient. Don't twist it into something else." But she saw the flicker of pain behind his mask, and she knew he was lying at least to himself. The next few days, Emily couldn't shake the image of him standing by the window, confessing the truth he had buried for so long. She carried it with her into work, where the bullying had suddenly ceased. People treated her with respect, nor at least caution. Yet she didn't want fear to be the reason. She wanted to earn her place. Late one evening, while reviewing campaign drafts at her desk, she found herself whispering, "Do I deserve to be here?" Alexander's question echoed in her mind. Yes, she decided, and she would prove it. That night, she returned home past midnight. The penthouse was dim, but the study light was on. Alexander sat at his desk, papers spread before him. He glanced up as she entered. "You're late," he said. "I had work," she replied, dropping her bag. "And before you say anything, no, I don't need you stepping in to save me." One corner of his mouth twitched. Noted she hesitated, then added, "But thank you for telling me about Lily. You didn't have to." The room stilled. His fingers tightened on his pen, then released it. He leaned back, eyes unreadable. "Don't thank me," he said quietly. "The past doesn't deserve gratitude. It deserves to stay buried." Emily shook her head. "Maybe, but it also explains why you are the way you are. And it makes me wonder, what?" His tone was sharper now, defensive. "If you'll ever let yourself live for something more than revenge." The words hung in the air like a dare. His jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. Emily turned, retreating to her room, her heart racing. She knew she had crossed a line, but part of her wanted to. Because, beneath all his armor, she had glimpsed the man he used to be, and she wasn't ready to stop digging. That night, Alexander sat alone in the study, staring at Lily's photograph tucked in his desk drawer. A girl with bright eyes and a laugh that could cut through the noise of DC. Her absence was the wound he never let heal. He closed the drawer, swallowing hard. Emily was dangerous. Not because she threatened his empire, but because she made him remember what it felt like to care. And caring, he reminded himself bitterly, had killed his sister. The phone call came just after dawn. Emily jolted awake to the sound of her ringtone echoing through the penthouse. She fumbled for her phone, her heart already racing. On the screen, "Mum, Emily." Her mother's voice broke, thin with panic. "It's your father." He collapsed. "They've taken him to George Washington University Hospital." The world blurred. "I'll be right there." She threw on clothes, barely noticing Alexander standing in the hallway, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, eyes sharp. "What happened?" he asked. "My dad," she said, trembling. "Hospital. I have to go." "I'll drive," he replied instantly. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion. Emily rushed down the corridor, her heels clicking. Alexander's stride steady beside her. Her father lay pale and fragile in the ICU tubes, snaking from his body. Machines beeped steadily, their rhythm a cruel reminder of how close he had come to silence. Emily gripped his hand, tears spilling. "Dad, please hang on." Her mother sat at his bedside, weary and frightened. "The doctors say it was his heart. Too much stress. They need to run more tests, but..." She glanced at Emily, her voice shaking. "We can't afford the treatments." Emily's chest constricted. She turned toward Alexander, desperate. "Can you?" But the words caught in her throat. She remembered what he had told her before. This marriage is business, nothing more. Still, she forced the words out. "Please, help him." Alexander's jaw tightened. He looked at Henry, then at Emily's pleading eyes. For a long moment, the silence between them was unbearable. Finally, his voice came, low and hard. No, Emily flinched. What? I warned you when we signed the contract. I don't owe your family anything. This, he gestured toward. The bed isn't my battle. Her mother gasped softly. Emily's face went white. She rose slowly, fury shaking her frame. You stood there in front of the world and called me your wife. You threatened to ruin a man for insulting me. And now, when it actually matters, you turn your back. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes' conflict, buried deep. This is about principles, Emily. Your father made choices. Choices that ruined my sister's life. I won't save him from the consequences. Her voice cracked. He's my father. He's not just a mistake on your ledger. The room rang with her words. Alexander said nothing. Emily turned away, tears spilling freely. If you can't help him, then stay out of my sight. She left the room, her footsteps echoing down the hall. Hours passed. Emily sat in the waiting room, staring blankly at the sterile walls, her heart breaking. Her father's condition was stable but uncertain. The doctors warning that the next 48 hours were critical. She didn't notice. Alexander standing at the end of the corridor, watching her. His hands clenched at his sides, his chest tight with a war he couldn't name. He had built his empire on discipline, on never bending. His father had taught him that weakness destroyed dynasties. His sister's death had proven it. But seeing Emily head bowed, eyes red, her small frame curled in grief, something inside him shifted. She wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for the man who had once destroyed him. And still, she was willing to beg, and he hated how much he wanted to give in. That night, Emily returned to the penthouse alone. Alexander arrived hours later. The silence between them was suffocating. She stood by the window, the Washington skyline sprawling beyond the glass. Her voice was low, brittle. You said you wouldn't let anyone humiliate me, but you just humiliated me more than Richard Hale ever could. Alexander froze. The words struck deeper than she knew. He approached, stopping a few feet behind her. You think I don't care? Emily turned, eyes blazing. Do you? For once, he had no answer. She laughed bitterly. That's what I thought. She brushed past him, retreating into her room. The slam of the door echoing through the apartment. Alexander stood in the quiet, her accusation burning in his chest. Do you care? He wanted to scream no. He wanted to remind himself this was a contract, that Emily Tran was leverage. Nothing more, but he saw her tears again, heard the crack in her voice, and something inside him whispered the truth he couldn't bear to face. He cared too much the next day. Alexander walked into his office at Voss Holdings, his mask firmly back in place. Assistants buzzed around him, reports piling on his desk. But his mind wasn't on mergers or markets. It was on Emily, on her father, on the line between revenge and love that blurred more with every step she took into his world. Sir, his chief of staff asked, dropping a file, do you want us to pull the hospital investment report you requested? Alexander's eyes flicked to the folder, then to the skyline beyond his window. Yes, he said finally, and set a meeting with the hospital board. Quietly back at the hospital, Emily sat with her mother, exhausted but unyielding. She had no idea that somewhere across the city, Alexander Voss was already bending the rules he had sworn never to break, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if it was strength or weakness pulling him toward her. The hospital corridors blurred into one long nightmare. Emily had spent 3 nights by her father's bedside, refusing to leave. She dozed in stiff plastic chairs, woke to the beeping of monitors, and paced the halls with cold coffee clutched in her hand. Her mother begged her to go home, but Emily shook her head. "I can't. What if something happens while I'm gone?" Her body protested, head pounding, stomach twisting, but she ignored it. She had learned long ago that pushing through pain was the only way to survive. By the 4th night, her fever began. At Aurora Media the next morning, she tried to pretend she was fine. She sat in the conference room, cheeks flushed, hands trembling as she flipped through her notes. Cheryl raised an eyebrow. "Are you sick, Emily?" "I'm fine," Emily whispered, her voice hoarse. But halfway through presenting a draft, the letters on the page swam. Her knees buckled. The room spun. Gasps echoed as she collapsed. When Emily opened her eyes, she was no longer at Aurora. She was in a penthouse bedroom, the sheets cool against her burning skin. Dim light filtered through the curtains. Her head throbbed, her body heavy. She turned, startled, to find Alexander sitting in an armchair beside her bed. His tie was loosened, his expression uncharacteristically raw. "You're awake," he said quietly. Confusion swirled. How did I get here?" "You fainted at work." His jaw tightened. "They called me. I brought you home." Emily tried to sit up, but dizziness forced her back down. "I should be at the hospital. My father, you're in no condition to go anywhere," Alexander cut in, sharper than intended. Then, softer, "I've already arranged for updates. The doctors will call as soon as there's any change." Her feverish mind struggled to process his words. Why? Why are you doing this? You said you wouldn't help him. His gaze darkened, as though he wanted to deny it. But instead, he leaned forward, his voice low. "Because I couldn't watch you fall apart." Emily's throat tightened. For the first time, the walls between them cracked wide enough for her to glimpse the man beneath the grief, the anger, the buried tenderness he fought so hard to hide. The hours blurred. Alexander stayed by her side, bringing water, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead, murmuring reassurances when she stirred in fever dreams. Once, half asleep, she whispered, "Why do you care?" He froze. The truth clawed at his chest. He wanted to say, "Because you remind me of everything I lost. Because you fight even when you're broken. Because you make me feel alive again." But the words stayed locked behind his teeth. Instead, he said simply, "Rest. You'll need your strength." On the 2nd day, Emily woke to find him dozing in the chair, head tipped back, shadows under his eyes. The sight startled her. Alexander Voss, untouchable CEO, looked almost human, vulnerable. She studied him quietly, her heart twisting. She had hated him, feared him, resented him. But in this moment, all she felt was the dangerous pull of something warmer. When his eyes opened and found hers, the air shifted. "You should eat something," he said, standing quickly, armor snapping back into place. "Why are you really here?" she asked softly. He paused, his back to her. "Because I couldn't stay away." That night, a storm rattled the city. Rain streaked the glass, thunder rolling over the Potomac. Emily lay awake, the fever finally breaking, but her thoughts restless. Alexander entered with a tray soup, tea, medicine. He set it on the table, his movements precise. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I know," he said simply. Their eyes met. For once, neither looked away. The silence between them wasn't cold this time. It was charged, alive. You hide behind your walls, Emily murmured. But you're not as heartless as you want people to believe. His jaw clenched. Don't mistake restraint for weakness. I don't, she said. I think it takes more strength to let someone in. Something broke in his expression, anger, pain, longing, all tangled together. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. I can't let you in, he said hoarsely. If I do, everything I've built, everything I've protected, it'll fall apart. Her heart hammered. Maybe it's not supposed to be walls forever. For a moment, he just looked at her. Storm grey eyes searching hers, as though she held the answer to a question he didn't dare ask. Then he turned sharply, retreating toward the door. Rest. Emily, we'll talk when you're stronger. But she could see it in his eyes before he left. The war raging inside him was no longer one he was winning. In the quiet after he left, Emily pressed her fingers to her lips, her chest aching with something dangerously close to hope. For the first time since signing that contract, she believed the impossible. The man she had married for convenience, the man who had sworn not to feel, was starting to fall. The fever had passed, but Emily still felt fragile. Her body begged for rest, yet her mind refused. Work piled up at Aurora, her father's condition remained uncertain, and the marriage contract hung over her like a storm cloud. Alexander's sudden tenderness had unsettled her more than his coldness ever did. She found herself replaying his words, because I couldn't stay away when she least expected it. But whatever progress they had made was short-lived, because enemies never slept in Washington. It began with the car Emily noticed at first leaving the hospital. A black SUV lingered in the rearview mirror all the way back to the city, too steady to be coincidence. When she turned into the parking garage beneath Aurora, it paused at the entrance, headlights glaring. Before rolling away, she shook it off as paranoia. Washington was full of government convoys and tinted glass. Still, unease twisted her gut. The next day, a note appeared on her desk. No signature, just 5 words scrawled in sharp ink. You don't belong here. Emily froze, her blood running cold. That evening, she confronted Alexander. He stood in the penthouse study, jacket discarded, tie loose, but his attention sharp as ever. Someone's following me, she blurted. At least I think so. And I found this. She shoved the note across his desk. He picked it up, eyes narrowing. The muscle in his jaw twitched. Who else has seen this? He asked. No one. I threw it away. But you should have brought it to me immediately. His voice was low, lethal, her temper flared. I'm not one of your employees, Alexander. You don't get to bark orders at me. His gaze snapped to hers, storm grey and burning. When your safety is at stake, I'll bark as loud as I damn well please. Her breath caught. Beneath his fury was something else, fear. The threats escalated quickly. Another note appeared in her locker at work. Step out, or you'll be forced out. Then came the phone call. A distorted voice, male, curt. He can't protect you. Walk away before it's too late. Emily slammed the phone down, her hands trembling. By the time Alexander arrived to pick her up that night, she was pale, shaken. He saw it instantly. What happened? When she told him, his expression hardened into steel. It's Richard Hale, or one of his allies. They can't touch me, so they're coming after you. Her stomach twisted. So I'm just leverage in your war. His silence said enough. That night, they argued. You promised me this was just business, Emily snapped, her voice breaking, that I wouldn't be dragged into your world. And now I'm the one paying for it. Alexander stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides. Do you think I wanted this? That I would ever choose to put you in danger? Then why keep me here? Tears burned her eyes. Why not let me walk away? His voice dropped, rough with something raw. Because I can't. The words silenced her. He looked at her then, unguarded for once, and she saw the truth shimmering beneath his armor. But before she could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face went grim. What is it? She asked. He grabbed his jacket. Stay here, Alexander. Emily, please. Just this once. Do as I say, and he was gone. Hours crawled by. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder rattled the glass. Emily paced the penthouse, her nerves fraying. Then came the sound. A crash at the door. The metallic click of a lock being forced. Her breath caught. 2 masked men burst in. Dark clothes, weapons glinting. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. She stumbled backward, searching desperately for anything to defend herself. Where is he? One snarled. I don't know. The man advanced, grabbing her wrist. She yanked away, terror flooding her veins. And then the door slammed open again. Alexander stormed in. Rain-soaked, eyes blazing, for the first time. Emily saw him not as a CEO, not as a husband on paper, but as a force of fury. Get your hands off her. The fight was brutal, fast. Alexander moved with precision, every strike fueled by cold rage. One man went down hard, the other fled, bloodied. Emily stood frozen, chest heaving. As silence returned, Alexander turned, his breath sharp, a cut bleeding at his temple. His eyes found hers, softer now. Are you hurt? She shook her head, though her body trembled. No, but you, I'm fine. Her tears spilled then, hot and unrelenting. I could have died. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. For once, she didn't resist. She buried her face against his chest, feeling the thunder of his heartbeat. You're not going anywhere, he murmured fiercely. Not while I'm alive. Her breath hitched. Why am I so important to you? His hand cupped the back of her head, his voice breaking. Because you're not just my wife on paper. You're the one thing I can't lose. The words shattered her. She pulled back just enough to see his face. His walls were gone raw, fear and love burned in his eyes. Alexander, she whispered, but before anything more could be said, sirens wailed outside. Security stormed the building, chaos filling the air. Alexander pulled away reluctantly, his hand lingering on hers. We'll finish this later. But Emily knew there was no later. The war they had both tried to deny had finally reached their doorstep, and their lives would never be the same again. The sirens faded, leaving the penthouse wrapped in a stunned quiet. Security had swarmed the hallway, police collected statements, and the building manager promised additional patrols. An EMT pressed gauze to the cut at Alexander's temple. He waved it off. His eyes never left Emily. You should go to the hospital, she whispered. I will, he said. But his voice had that anchored calm she was starting to recognize, not indifference, but certainty. After I make sure you're safe. She looked down at their hands. His fingers were scraped, her knuckles white. The ring between them glinted under the recessed lights, an emblem that had meant nothing until tonight. Who sent them? she asked. His jaw flexed. Hale, or one of his proxies. When they fail to wound the fortress, they go after what's inside it. She swallowed hard. Me, you, he said, the single word rough with fury and fear. And that ends now. He stepped away to take a call. His voice dropped into that clipped cadence she'd heard in boardrooms. A name, a set of instructions, the promise of consequences, swift, legal, total. When he returned, his eyes were dark steel. I'm filing charges. Private security will double coverage here and at Aura. And he hesitated. I'm moving you out of the line of fire. Emily stiffened. Meaning I'm no longer going to let you pay for my war. But it's our life, she said, softer than she intended. Not just your war. Something in his expression cracked. It doesn't have to be, he said. Not anymore by morning. DC woke to headlines. Attempted break-in at Voss Penthouse Source's site. Corporate feud. Hale Capital under investigation. For contracted harassment. Alexander had moved overnight lawyers. Investigators, a statement that was somehow both restrained and devastating. He didn't name names. He didn't have to. The phone calls began apologies, denials, fear wrapped in diplomacy. Hale's board called an emergency session. People who'd snickered at Gallus suddenly discovered ethics. Emily watched it all unfold from the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a mug of tea cooling in her hands. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt empty. The adrenaline had burned off, leaving only the weight of choices. Alexander sat across from her. Tie loosened, the bandage at his temple a small, startling imperfection on a man who usually wore his power like armor. He set his phone down. The hospital called. He said. She sat up straight. My father. He stabilized overnight. He said gently. They're moving forward with treatment. Relief broke through her like sunlight. Oh, thank God. Tears sprang to her eyes, unexpected and hot. I need to be there. I'll take you, he said, already reaching for his jacket. She touched his wrist. Why are you doing this? For him? He searched her face, and when he answered, his voice was low, stripped of performance. I thought revenge would keep me upright. I thought if I held on to it long enough, I'd never feel the drop. But last night, when I saw that man lay a hand on you, I understood something I should have learnt a long time ago. What? She whispered, that love isn't a liability, he said. It's the only reason to stop falling. Her breath caught. Alexander, I can't change the past, he said. I can't bring Lily back, and I can't rewrite what your father did. But I can choose what I do next. And I'm choosing you. For a beat, the room held its breath with her. Then she let the air go in a trembling rush and nodded once. Take me to my dad. George Washington University Hospital hummed with the low-frequency anxiety of a city always on alert. Emily found her mother in the ICU waiting room, color slowly creeping back into her face. He's stronger, her mother said, gripping her hands. The doctors are optimistic. Emily laughed through tears. Optimistic had become her favorite word. Alexander hung back, not intruding, not leaving. When Emily finally pulled him toward the room, Henry Tran lay pale but watching. The last time Alexander had stood at a bedside like this, he'd been a different man. He could feel the old rage trying to climb his spine. Henry's voice was rough. Mr. Voss, Henry? Alexander's tone carried no heat, but it carried history. Henry swallowed. I don't have the right words. Emily squeezed his hand. You don't have to. But the older man shook his head, eyes flicking to Alexander and then back to his daughter. I made mistakes. I chased deals I didn't understand. I told myself I was protecting my family when I was really protecting my pride. If there's a ledger, I deserve the debt. Silence stretched. Machines beeped. Somewhere, a nurse laughed. Alexander stepped closer. He saw a man diminished, not just by illness, but by remorse. He heard Lily's laugh in the back of his mind and felt the cold years of anger behind him like a long winter, finally thinning. You're right about the debt, he said. Emily flinched, but he continued, voice steady. And I'm done trying to collect it. This doesn't absolve anything. It doesn't erase the past. But it stops with me. Henry's eyes glossed. Thank you. Alexander inclined his head, then looked at Emily. I'll be outside. She followed him into the hallway. You didn't have to do that, she said. I did, he replied. For you, and for the version of me who might have lived if someone had said enough. She stepped in, close enough that the hospital's fluorescent lights turned his, irises the color of storm clouds, right before they blow out to blue. What happens now? He exhaled. I've established a blind trust to cover your father's care and to restructure the company not as a takeover, but as a lifeline. No announcements. No leverage. Just help. She blinked. You'd do that. Quietly. He gave a wry half-smile. I can be ruthless, loudly. Turns out I can be decent quietly. Her laugh was a small, disbelieving sound. And us. His answer came without hesitation. No more conditions. No more clock counting down. If you'll have Menard as a contract, not as a fortress, but as a man who will spend the rest of his life proving he deserves you. The world narrowed to his face. His voice, the impossible gentleness that had somehow survived inside him. She rose on her toes and kissed him, careful of the bandage, reckless with everything else. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a truce. It was an answer. When they parted, she touched his cheek. Let's go home, she said. But stop pretending that place is just glass and marble. Make it a home with me. Tell me how, he said. Start with dinner that's not catered, she teased. And a couch we actually sit on. Done, he said. And for the first time since she'd known him. His smile reached his eyes warm, imperfect, human. Spring swept in hard that year, cherry blossoms exploding around the tidal basin, tourists crowding the mall, power suits switching to linen. The news cycle churned on, as it always did. Hale resigned in a flurry of statements. Aurora implemented new guardrails against workplace harassment. The article about the Willard Gala sank under newer scandals in the penthouse. The changes were quieter. A second mug appeared by the espresso machine, favored lipstick pink. A bowl of clementines sat on the counter because Emily liked to peel them while reading briefs. A soft grey throw showed up on the couch. They ate in the kitchen sometimes, standing, laughing over burnt toast because he had insisted on cooking and then insisted it was edible. They disagreed. They negotiated. They practiced the hardest parts of love, staying when the easy thing was to withdraw, reaching when the old instinct was to armor up. Alexander saw a therapist for the first time and didn't tell anyone except Emily. She took on a bigger role at Aurora, not because of his name but in spite of it, her ideas carrying rooms that used to disregard her. On a warm Saturday, They walked along the Potomac at sunset. Crew shells cut the river in even strokes, and the breeze carried the distant sound of a marching band from a college game day. Alexander's hand found Emily's without thinking. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Signing the contract?" He considered. "I regret the man I was when I did, not the path it put me on." "And now?" she asked. He squeezed her fingers. "Now I wake up and there's something in my life I didn't build to keep the world out. I built it to let you in." She bumped her shoulder against his. "You're getting good at this." "I have an excellent teacher," he said dryly. They reached a bench facing the water, carved with a quote about service and grace. Emily tucked her feet up beneath her, watching a heron lift off from the bank, slow and certain. "What happens to the contract?" she asked eventually. He looked out over the river. "We let it expire, and then—" He turned to her, the wind lifting a strand of her hair. "Then we choose each other again. No signatures, no witnesses. Just us." She smiled, eyes bright. "Deal," he laughed, surprised by how light the word felt now. He drew her close, his forehead resting against hers. The city's noise blurring into a kind of music. There would be challenges, mergers to wrangle, headlines to outlast, ghosts that would never fully disappear. But as the river slid past and the sky went copper, the future felt less like a contract and more like a promise. Not perfect, not guaranteed, chosen,